So I am here with Dorothy, and we are talking on the major arcanas and the minor arcanas of the tarot and the truth that we see in multiple perspectives in that sense.
Sweet. Okay. Well, so over on my channel, since we're all channels and this is the social media that we are using to stream the versions of us that you get to hear and see, this is where we will take off at 1:33. Woo! Okay. So, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Laura J here today with a special opportunity for you to be able to learn about the tarot and the 5 elements within it from a very unique perspective with Rosemary, who goes by Rose War because it's part of her last name. And it's also a demonstration of the fact the truth is hidden in plain sight. So, Rose, how's it going today?
It's going great. How are you today?
Yeah, fantastic. And very much looking forward to this opportunity because tarot has been a guilty pleasure of mine that I don't feel so guilty about, though until we know how to actually interpret it for ourselves, it is a not waste of time, but the time could be better invested because then we have our own investment in the ledge we know, for that is how I describe knowledge compared to wisdom of lived experience, where then we step into the wizard's domain. Or to break it in terms of the tarot, the magician who has access to all of the suits on the table and then can choose which one will serve him better.
Yes. And additionally, so I would like to add, so I have, and I have the cards, and that's what happened to you.
Awesome.
But you can actually see visual interpretation today. But so with the magician card, again, it's more about that control, right? When we are actually looking at it, the control of the magician, the control of the environment, the control of each symbol, which we have the elements on there of each of the smaller suits, which is earth, fire, and wind. You have all of those on there in water, right? Then you have the spirit above. It's kind of symbolized here, infinity symbol. And even the magic wand, right? They're all holding each one of them. But also the unique perspective about the Fool card, because some people put it before the magician card, and some people put it at the end of the journey, right? And one of the things I've kind of gone through is that the Fool card is the beginning of the journey into that, right? Where you're just blindly walking into it, but also at the end of your journey, when you know this knowledge, right? The ledge that you're walking off of, right?
Right.
It's blind faith. So for everybody else, we look at so foolish because they don't know the knowledge inside that we have gone through this path to go through a life path in a way. It's all life paths. And when you get to that point where it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, you know yourself so well, know thyself, feel thyself, that there's even no point to do that control. You
Right.
already know that control is there, right? Control itself. So it's a unique perspective. And I'm glad to share the linguistics part with you as well, because again, it's all language.
Yeah, absolutely. Language is the key because if we don't know how to interpret the signs, symbols, and omens that we see, then we don't have access to the higher vantage point that can see the bigger picture, which is why today we're breaking it down in a unique way. I'm going to ask you to speak louder so that we can hear and it's not a strain without needing to combine stress and pain to get the strain. And so I wanted to start today with a breakdown of the numerology of 0 to 9 within the minor arcana. And for anyone who is new to the minor arcana, those are the suits, which I often talk about in terms of the legal fiction being the personages, statuses, and titles that convert the man or woman into something other than they originally were, because the suit makes us appear to be more or less. So before we actually go into the numerological perspective of the suits, is there anything that you wanted to speak into from that perspective, Rose?
No, not particularly. The numerology is actually really good with the interpretations of the card itself. So I think we should go right into that.
Beautiful. All right, I'm going to let you lead that part of this presentation.
All right. So with the 0 through 9, which actually goes with a lot of Pythagoras belief, if you kind of go back there, I'm going to go into the history of this. So Pythagoras believed in, if you actually, I believe it was 0 through 9, maybe 1 through 9. But if you look at it in a dimensional layer, so when we start with 0, even in computer terms, 0, a 1 actually can be a 0 as well. So in the matrix system, zeros, right? So if you actually take a point and flip it onto its side, it becomes the 1. So you can actually flip that over and over. It becomes an opening or a closing, depending on input or output in a computer, black hole or white hole. So when you start with 0, you're starting at full circle, you're starting at full spectrum. And it is a starting point, but it is also an ending point for something else, right? So then when we start getting into the 1, we always see it's a new beginning. And we have, again, it's a new step, right? In perspective of 1 and unity, 2 is always the duality part. We see the yin and yang within it. And again, it's also 2 aspects. We see left and the right? It's the duality, it's the division part. But even when we go from 0 to 1 to 2, you get the passes, you get the 2, right? You always have that 1 in the middle. Open. So all of those are even, they're feminine but also masculine archetypes as well. So when you get to 3, that's the trinity that we always talk about. And 3 is a lot to deal with. If you see the double numbers, the 33s or the 3 we talk about ascended master, so it's extra knowledge gain, but it's also the between the physical realm, the mind, the body, and the soul part that we don't see. So it's actually the third eye. So eye 2. So 1, 2 eyes, 3 equals the third eye. 4 is your quad for computer in a way, your brain space, the thought process, your feelings and emotions. 4 is also your protection layer. So when you're interpreting cards, 4 is the path of protection. It gives you our higher sense connection. 5 is more of this, and 4 is expressive, very expressive. 5 is more of the change. We see these shifting and changes, right? So when you see 5, 5, you're on a change cycle. You're getting to shift, it's swift movement into it. And even then, when you combine that with cards like swords are very swift, very air-like movements, very fast, right? 5 in changing waters, 5 with cups. If you look at the 5 of cups card, that is very much, I believe it's the card that some people call it. It's like, okay, why is it talking about emotions that could even be depressing, right? 5 of cups. 5 of pentacles, I believe, is, some people interpret it being left out in a cold type situation, but that's the abundance that we see in the failing lack. So you can see it from each one. But even lack mentality is also, again, it's what you're putting out. 6 is your balance or harmony. 3 above, 3 below. Juggling in a way, right? So 6 together. 7 is more of the internal. You're looking at your internal source, so you go back inside. So it's even an ebb and flow between each number. It's outside, internal, external. Each one through that. So when you get to 6, or 7 anyway, 7 heaven, right? Heaven is inside of us, right? So chakra, even 7 chakras, being open and alignment. It's seeing where your energies are being leaked out, or where you can help to bring your energy back inside of you. 8 is more of the connection with source. We see that in the magician card. We see that about the infinity symbol. So that is 8, literally turned on its side. And that is, again, that's when duality meets a unity point. So when you go through your 7 chakras, and you go through that and then get to that point above, and keep going the chakra system above, you're connecting yourself right to source that is you. And You are source. You are, it is inside of us. Each one of us is on that journey. So when you get to 9, you get to this completion in a way. It's a completion of that process, and even a completion of a universal frame. We look at the Emerald Tablets, which is also part of Pythagoras' teaching. He did go, he had a teacher called Avaris, who was of Gnostic schools, and did learn a lot from the Emerald Tablets in itself. 9 is the ending of one universal cycle, and then we become multiverse. Go back to 0. So here's your 9, completeness, full sphere, and then you go to another sphere in the universe, which is 1. So it starts all over. So when people say 11th dimension, it's not 11. It's just a new dimension. It's a new space. 1, 2, all over again. So it repeats itself over and over again in different perspectives, different layers, different colors. You have the color scale on it. So each one of these numbers, in a way, they represent, if you're not even able to interpret what's on the card, the symbol, you can actually go by the numerology. And then breaking those down, you get the double digit numbers. Certain ones are master numbers, 11, 22, they're the master numbers. But when you break down certain numerology, you can actually break it into its simplest terms, right? Simplest forms, even the multiplication tables. Break the double digits to the simplest terms, and it is actually a repeated process over and over, and it does describe the reality space. Along with the tarot, again, which describes our physical space, our mental space, soul space in a way, and how that equates to what's inside and what's outside of us.
Fantastic. So one thing that came to mind while you were saying that is recent conversations I've been having about my BS belief systems around dimensions. And from what I feel or understand or have just come to believe is that the third dimension is the physical form. Fourth dimension is the mental constructs that overlay the physical form. And then fifth dimension is actually when we merge the realities that could be into the heart. So then we're in alignment with the present now moment where all our power to create actually is birthed.
So third dimension is what we resonate in, what we see, what we feel, right? The actual matter. Fourth dimension, I use fourth as time. It's an actual construct we make in our mind, our constraints, right? It's very confining in time. People get in time quantum traps in a way because they have these necessities of needing to do something, or and it's like, what is it that you're actually required to have, right? The conditions. Fifth is unconditional love, which we see in our heart space. So once you break those conditions, you get into an infinite possibilities. So even dimensional layers like the sixth dimension and the seventh, they're actually very close to each other. 6 is the balance of your energies in the 3D and the 5D, so what's inside. You balance those in, spiritual with physical. That's your balance point. 7th would be more of the, a lot of people describe the 7th place, 7th heaven, where they see a lot of different entities or a lot of different light beings, because that is the visual part of it. When you get to the third eye above, you're seeing different layers of light being coming in and out. 8th was described as what we would call Akashic records, right? So, and that's a linear Akashic records to this particular timeline that we're in. When you get to 9, like I was saying, so 9th dimensional layer, that's the bubble. That's the edge of it. Even in the Emerald Tablets, and they say if you want to go past it, you don't travel in a straight line, you travel in a curve. If you think of it as a bubble, right? So it's a square. And when you break out of that, you go into the next universe. The portal at 0101, in and out, black hole, white hole, in order to know the frequency, in order to break out of that. That's actually, that is particularly mentioned, and we can use the cards for that. The Hangman card in general actually describes Odin hanging upside down from the world tree, Yggdrasil, for 9 days. So until he gained runes, which is spelling, which is knowledge, and he was said to sacrifice an eye, but gained another eye, a third eye. So as you look at the Hangman as a sacrifice in a way, It's more of sacrificing what you see in a 3D space in order to see something from within, to then go back out, right? How we get that wisdom from within. So definitely yes, it is the dimensional layers as well.
And when you say about sacrificing the I would actually take it to the letter system of capitis diminutio media maxima and minima, which is the ways that we are capitalized based on whether we are able to dot the I and keep our head about us, or whether it gets boxed in top to bottom when capitalized within a capitalistic system that ultimately uses us within the imperfect usufruct, I say, to be the way us is fruct.
Yes, yes, most definitely. It is containing a box. Again, you're putting it, here's your I, your actual, your integration even of your energies that are inside of you, and they're putting a cap on it, put
Yeah.
you in that box, right? Capitalism, cap on, right?
Yeah.
Whereas simply there is no box. There never was a box. That is again put you back into the fourth dimensional conditions, right? Unconditional love is break. There is no box. There's no conditions.
Yeah.
And we actually start investigating even the rules of morals in society then, because where did moralistic society, where did that come from? I mean, 100 years ago, slavery was a law that was moralistically accepted. That's another condition on a person, right? How is that acceptable? And yet those are social morals. Those are still conditions, right? That we go through. And it's like, so what is the conditions of a human being? What is the confinements?
Well, a hue is only but one aspect of color. And so that is where the colors of law and colors of right draw us into the public where we can be capitalized. And when you say the word moralistic, I break it down as more all I stick. So, what all are we referring to? Because from my view, the all is the exclusion of none. So, what does the all not contain except for the aspects of it that had to be individuated in order to experience itself as separate to be able to then come back and know what the all is, which is why I believe we are the individuated expressions of the grand overall designer that we all came from.
Yeah, each one of us is in a way our own timeline, right? Our own admin code source to the server that we're playing in. And when we start to see the commonalities between each person's timelines, each person's how something I may experience or feel in my timeline may be common to what somebody else experiences, or therefore fractal into them, we see that the separateness, the division that they're causing in a way that is actually the illusion. That is the illusion. We're not actually separate at all. So when you, like you said, when you're saying all, that's again the brand thing of it is that when we put a cap on source, on creation itself, you're limiting it. Even me defining it, me saying that this is grass, I'm limiting what it is because it's a living thing. It has energy. It's beyond even just the containment of the 3D that we see it, we feel it, we smell it, we are able to connect with it. So it is more than just what we define it.
Yeah, as soon as anything has been specified, it's been limited because then you can only find that specification within this box of this word with this syntax, semantics, and semiotics, which is based on how we order the meanings we associate with the word and then how we study those, which are the definitions of those three: syntax, semantics, and semiotics.
And so I had something interesting about that. So going back to the first 3 podcast episodes I had did, we can go back and look at the tetragrammaton. if you're not familiar. And it is just those four letters, YHWH, which I believe is the Israeli God of Yahweh. But that word, again, there is no nouns. Again, it's a sign. So when you actually take those letters though, and you put them in a 3D model, take the Y, turn it upside down, superimpose it on itself, but actually it looks like an hourglass in a 3D model, right? And then you take even the H, which if you turn into a cylinder with a line in it, that's your pitch up and down inside of that actual hourglass. And then if you take the M or the W and you switch it up and down to M, it actually is your amplitude, your frequency. And when you stick that inside all together and you put that inside, once you start saying words, frequency, symbols to it, right? You start having emotions. Emotions are energy, emotions. When you start to actually put it into that hourglass sphere, that is how when it hits certain frequencies, you get the golden spiral, you get notes on the chord, you get colors, because colors are also formed from resonance frequency. We see it as a frequency of photons. And that's where all of that creation in a way came from. It's just literally those four letters. It's the first sign into the matrix that we're in, the first word, right? It's actually the first breath that was here, the first sound that we've ever kind of even made, which would be the first splitting from source, from unity in a way. And for all of us to have these different perspectives, different colors, different filters that we're sitting in, different hues, and even as a human being, we have the ability to become full spectrum, like we are full spectrum, like we came from that. We are all going back to that, but from different perspectives, different bodies, different matter, through these spaces that we're in. So it's unique to actually see that, again, it's not assigned. It's not assigned, it's Yahweh, Sinaway. Sinaway is an Ute tribe, Native American, that is their name for their greater God. It's the same thing, just telephone being in different perspectives. And even from your perspective and mine, we can look at a car and see it completely different go down the street. There's nothing wrong with either one. It's just the filter we see it in. It's just what is assigned to us that gives us meaning when we see an object or experience.
Yeah, our perception is everything. So, with that being said, what about the court cards, which would be the equivalent to the Jack, Queen, King, Ace, or the Page, Knight, Queen, King, Ace, right?
Yes. So, okay, so with the court cards, and even those numerology wise, so you get to 11. Again, those are master numbers, right? I wouldn't break down 11 on those. I believe that would be your night card. When you're breaking, you wouldn't break that number down. It's still a swift moving number, but also 11 is part of the unity part, right? You see that as a double number. It's part of bringing in your masculine and feminine energies into one being. So the night cards are usually, and they're very much very bold cards, right? Very swift moving, and knights in general, but they also have their own armor on. They're very much protected. They're very much ready for anything. So when you get into, again, like get to 12, get to 13, 14, even 13 is not even a bad number. It's actually something very expressive and moving in itself as well. And 14 is an actually very lucky number. It's very much about standing into, if you look at 5. So it's moving. You break it down again. So that's 5. It's 4. You're actually getting into that whole archetype of the change. But also, so 13, I believe, is the queen card. So people say, unlucky number, it's actually 4. That's the protection. And even if you're looking at chess plays on a board, usually you're trying to protect the queen on the board when you're playing a chess game. So that is something that is, and yet it's very prominent. Everybody sees the queen on the board, right? It's very strong energy on the board because that's the light, right? That's the one that's kind of holding the balance place. And that is what you're protecting in a way. That's your 4. So 12 is 3. You're 3D when your movement on the board. And I believe even on a chess piece, you've got bishops on the board, which can represent one page, clear piece on it. So yes, I'm diving into the whole chessboard kind of mentality. And then we get, again, the king is usually the strong one, but it's very flexible. It's 5 because it changes. It's 14, which is 5. So it's very flexible. It is the one that can actually move across the board a lot more. And then you get into this, see all the other aspects, the conditions. If you really think of the courts, when we go into the court system, it's even the judge in a way, because you have everybody lines up to go to court, right? Everybody lines up and comes to the king and tells them of their problems so that the king can actually just be the judge in this. Instead of also employing, and then we started to employ more people, judge, jury, and our peers type kind of thing, right? So this way it's not just one person using their own, just one perspective in order to actually fix a scenario. The page would be, the page in a deck is also your messenger. Again, it's your person, your squire in a way, the one that carries everything. So they're the one that has the message. They're the one that's carrying the gift, the cup, right? They're carrying the coin. They're carrying just the message of it. Even the ace is the number 1. It's carrying the new message, a new idea, the new beginning in a way, new path, right? Magic. So it is the actual implementation of the tool in a way, the new point, the new magic wand. It is just the actual physical in a way, because it is 1. And even when you start adding in, we're going to add in another number sequence. So even if we do numerology, let's add in the Fibonacci. It's 1, 1, 2, 3. We actually skip 5. Why? Because we don't see it. We can feel it. We can see it being equated in the 3D world. We don't actually see it. So even in the Fibonacci, we don't actually see it. And the 1, 1 represents black or white, input outputs, which one did you come from? 2 is when you bring it together. So now you have shades of gray, like the yin yang. And then 3 is when you start adding other colors into it. You can actually even equate it to, and I'm going to go back. So when we get to the, you have the colors even on the cards, right? When you start implementing all of the court cards, then you have a system. So you can actually see even where those would be confining. I mean, we're talking about a monarchy system now. We're talking about an actual system of control by 1 or 2 people. So instead of appreciating the rest of the deck in there, the rest of the people that are hard working in it, and you see them on all the cards, you see all the wands, you see people working on it. So you're actually even, again, your court. Who's holding the court? Is it a vindictive queen with her swords? Is she in balance? So is it a king that is very much a dictator? When we look at when you look at the Emperor card, and it's funny because in the one deck I have, the Emperor card, it's actually King Arthur in this particular deck that I have. If you look at the Emperor card, and when the Emperor card is interpreted in an upside down position, it's actually talking about somebody who's completely abusing power. So if we can imagine King Arthur literally abusing his power, again, and he's got a sword. So those are sword cards that you're actually looking at. You're actually looking at power being controlled, right? Again, back to the magician, back to controlling our environment instead of letting it flow. So those court cards and even the numbers surrounding them, again, is how much control are we giving those courts, especially when we talk about the court system in the 3D realm that we're in. How much of it are taking that light of 3 colors in a way, right? You can look at it as CKMY, which is a computer, RGB, right? Think of it as RGB, and we combine them together, we get all the colors of television. CKMY is printing. And when we add that into printing now, there's circles that are overlapping that actually create more colors in that color printing. But all those on numerology, black or white, and so adding more circles, you can actually see them. That is a reality space that we're seeing here. And then our experience comes in when we have the emotional layer into it. That is all part of the confinements of the court. Hopefully I didn't go too much on the tangent.
It's insightful and appreciated. And it's just, we speak in words that are familiar to us and then presume others are also familiar with what feels so simple because of its familiarity to us. When we're talking about something someone else would relate to with a different word or in a different way. And then it goes back to the syntax, semantics, and semiotics, I feel.
Yes. So, relatively speaking, in a way, um, it's relative to each person's experience. So, talking to a person, we can actually take what they're familiar with, whether that is a computer realm, whether that is a video game, whether that is a television show. You can actually see the hidden pattern that's in it. It all goes back to, again, I was using those 4 letters. That is the first note. And then we started, again, it's a simple, we have, and I say need. How would you have a story develop if we had no character development? We only had the 4 parts. We didn't have the musician. We didn't have the rest of that. We didn't have any chord parts. We didn't have any of the elements in there. We didn't have earth and fire and wind and water. We didn't have any of that. How would we have character? How would we grow, right? And then because of that growth, we have different perspectives for that reason. Because as much as a time, in a way, we are eternal beings. But in this particular, now that we're in this matter that we're in, where usually it's afforded a certain amount of time, right? A certain amount of age process, at least before we forget and we transform to something else. Transition. But can you imagine if we wanted to experience everything and we were only afforded 80 years? Now, wouldn't it be easier to talk to somebody who did that experience, who had the Tibetan meditation for 80 years and gain that knowledge from that person and say, listen, I can exchange what I have, what knowledge I've done for 30 some years or 40 years or whatever, and actually start bringing that into another person. And then this way you share that experience and now you have a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. That is the unique part of this division, dividing, conquering mentality way, where now we're going back into unity because now we've learned so much and we're a lot faster when we're able to communicate with each other. And that's where the common threads come from. Even though, again, the major arcana is that common thread pattern. It's in different sequences, it's in different, different size, it'll come in at different times. Sometimes we repeat the step, right? We have a tower moment, we go back and repeat it. But a lot of people can learn from other people. Again, the key that I have, that I got out, that I may have survived with and thrived with, maybe the key that somebody else needs to get out of their space, to get out of their box, their cycle. And if we didn't open up to share, if we didn't have a common, at least lingual or even emotional experience together, it would never have that experience to get out of that situation. Language.
Yeah. Language absolutely is how we find those common threads. And when I got locked up under the Mental Health Act and my world changed entirely, leading up to that, I was trying to say we need to put the best of what already exists onto the table. And then we can all look at the belief systems that we have given our energy, which is power, to, in order to refine all of these ideas down to their values and virtues, to see these words that we have used to label and divide ourselves and cells within that identity are ultimately just boxes that the walls can drop in order to become bridges. So then we stop killing one another to fight someone else's war. When yesterday I was listening back to a video I recorded about the need to actually create a common language of the people, for the people, and with the people, which is what we are working on. And ultimately, Laurelese is how we please the people by coming together and doing exactly that. But the video, in listening back to it, I had mentioned weapons and the fact that if we are carrying weapons, then our hands are occupied and we actually can't right the wrongs because our hands are full of arms. But the reality or the realization I had while I was listening was that the word weapon is we a pawn when you break it down. And then it goes back to the chess game that had the patterning of that had become so obvious to me. I was speaking about it in terms of needing to choose whether to move as a pawn, bishop, or king, forgetting in that insane space the power of the rook and the queen and the other one that I am not thinking of in this moment. That's the rook.
Yes.
The castle, the rook, the bishop, the knight, the king and queen and pawn. So there's only just the 6 archetypes with on the board.
Mm-hmm. And then the whole idea of, so I'm going to give an example. It's funny because it goes with this. So the idea of first playing chess, I first played chess. I say I don't know how to play actually. But I understand the concept when we talk about timelines, right? Because each one of us is a chessboard in itself, right? When we move across the board here. And
Right.
we do affect each chessboard, if you ever look at Star Trek, chessboards. So one move on one board is going to affect and put, if I move a pawn, it's going to affect and put a queen ejecting on another board, and then another universe, another multiverse, another person's multiple perspective can actually factor in with a butterfly effect. But so for me, when I had played first, I played against advanced computer and won against in 8 moves, and I didn't know how because I didn't know how to play. But literally, what I did when I went back and had somebody break down and lose me is take the pawn and moved it across the board to get to the other side to get a queen on that. So we don't forget that our pawns are just important because they can be queens. We can move them across the board and transform them and transition them, right? So each piece, every piece, is very important on a board. And then additionally, on other people's boards that we may not see, our ID, right? I one dimension. So because we're doing it as in divide, individuals, in divide, right? In divide of duality. So if we don't, again, if we see it more of as unity, because it isn't just a move, it's we now. Now we begin to appreciate each move, each piece, each player on board because they're just important. They're not just one piece. So in that learning experience, it's how you, again, intuitively go through life. The intuition side of it. I didn't play logically. I played intuitively to just, I don't know how, it didn't matter to me. I was just like, okay, what did I do? So it's the intuition side, the fool side of the card, just foolishly going through and playing.
Yeah.
But you're not doing it in a way that is intentful, right? There's your idea. I intent, right? What do I intend? What do I intend on somebody else? So again, what is the intent on it? If I'm not doing it with an intention to hurt anybody, and not even really an intention to win, just to figure it out, just to move. There's no harm in that. There's no harm in somebody else's work. And then additionally, you create, again, the duality part. So we'll talk about duality. So I'm going to talk about the 0 point. We're going to go back to 0. So this is fun. So we'll go back to 0. So what we call 0 point, which is also the Fool card, it is 0, okay? So sitting at what I call 0 point, or what, and I know it's been coined, people have been saying it now. So basically, it's like being the drop, right? You're sitting under source, you're getting the drop in the middle of that pool, and it's coming out. And it is the cup. That's the vessel we are in of unconditional love, the cup of life that is going through us, the actual cup we're sitting in, and that's who we are, and it's dropping down, and it ripples out. Now, the double-edged sword, when we use our voice, especially with intuition, when we're connected straight to source, and it just flows right out of us like water, right? Even when you look in a biblical term, if you look at Revelations, the double-edged sword, the Christ, the next Christ consciousness that's going to be here, which is us, that when he speaks, it speaks like warring waters. Why? Like water. Why? It's a double-edged sword that way. Because if anybody who's in a lower vibration, maybe they're in their own trap, they're in their own, sitting in their own karma in a way, which is duality, they're going to be inundated by that. They're going to see it from that perspective as a particular, like something bad for them. And all you did was speak truth. Now, somebody sitting at your level, they're going to share that one. They're going to cup of cornucopia, right? It's the overflow. Share with them. So it doesn't mean that you intended to do something bad, but somebody's perspective is in a lower vibe, in fear mode, in duality, and only seeing us versus them, the black versus white. They are going to take it as a negative because they're in divide individuality instead of in union, in a yin yang, not a yin and yang. So that's where the whole 0 point comes from, is we could take that person's projection back onto us as personal, which would then put us back in divide and not at 0 point. 0 point is the eye of the storm, the calm center. So wherever we move, and it's really not I, it's the I without anything attached. It's an L. Without for Laurelese. So again, the L, right? It is the linguistic, it is the line that doesn't separate them. It is literally that funnel, that twirl. So going back to 0, we may look foolish to them. If there is a them, because we're all connected anyway.
Yep.
There is really no them. We may look foolish, but it doesn't matter because they're going to learn something, and they can either fractal away, they'll get repelled, or they may try to come closer and learn. So it is a good tool. We're just now dealing out, I see that, instant karma. We become done. We become full. And when we speak, it is, well, however, if somebody's in a karmic, they're not in dharma, they're going to receive a karmic lesson from it, right?
Right.
Give them the opportunity.
That's brilliant. And when I made that call, and I often go back to that experience because it was very foolish. And I had tuned into the magic of the moment to the point where then I didn't want it to stop. So my ego took over the soulful experience that I had been having, and I didn't discern that shift within me. And so that was when we got in trouble, all of me, and got locked up. But I do believe it was also my higher self redirecting me off of a path that wasn't working. Because when I got locked up after 2.5 years of writing the book that took it was 2.5 years, and then it took another 2.5 to resolve it in order to publish it. Last June 28th was the day specifically. But writing that book, I had many of those theories already by September 27th of 2019 when I made that call and reported the police were corrupt and the system, they were in on it and all of that, which is ridiculously foolish, but there must be some good ones and I'm here to help bring peace to this world. So take me to your leaders. And then I got locked up. But the crazy thing is it was so foolish, but it also destroyed the life I was trying to forge for myself that was based on concepts that did not help me when I got into that situation. It was the inner reserves that had to come forward in order to serve me.
Yes. So, and it's funny you said ego. I'd say ego, so emotions, again, back to the ego, out of control, and a lot of times they control us, right? Yes. So, and on top of it, this is where we get into, from my perspective, but it's also helping people to unlock what they see, is when somebody sees shadow projections. So I'm going to go into that, the demonic possession type thing. If you look at somebody who's, their ego is in complete control of them, they look like they're possessed because it's their shadow basically controlling them, right? And then when you actually project and somebody actually takes into their core, into their space, their truth, and actually takes it as their truth, what your shadow's projecting, and a lie creates a demon, creates a shadow, right? It creates it on us. We operate from that. So when that happens, and we put that on somebody else, and somebody accepts it, it becomes acidic, it becomes attachment. So they're attached to that truth. That it's got to be, you said it, but if it's a lie that they've been telling themselves and they don't even know that, that's their ego lie, their emotions go. So now you're exerting control on somebody else. So now we can see where the shadow comes in and on a bigger scale. So if we look at, like we're saying, we look at our system, the government system, if we really go into and delve into that now, it is people's individuality, their even greed in a way, the monetary system, so the outward of materials that they want and grab and they want to hoard, which is the ego projection, right? And then what they're doing is they're projecting it onto other people that you need to have this house, you need to have this time, you need to work 9 to 5, you need to do all of this. And then what does that do to a human being? You're not able to actually get that perspective. You're only experiencing what you want to compare.
Yeah, the hue.
Exactly. So that's where we get the dis-ease, the diseases that we come in, which is the number one thing that that is the cause of disease, is stress. Look at everything that you're stressed out about in life. Everything that everybody is. Money. We need money. We need this to live. We need to. When in actuality, what is it that we were required to live? Shelter, food, water, people. People are way more important. And then so we start working together as people to undo all of that, to undo their shadow that they're projecting on us. That is the shadow government, right? Putting their shadows. Be the light in the dark.
Yeah. And there is no them and they. It's all us doing this to us when we actually see it's men and women filling those positions that are fulfilling orders that make them betray their conscience. Like the charge that was stayed against me and the others who spoke the day that I did in 2021, where then my person was summoned, which I have, but am not, but will be implied to be until I said, no, that is not me, and I do not agree to be surety for it. Then it was men and women who were acting unconscionably to move that piece of paper and the charge against my person, which is the equivalent of a credit card, forward further than once I had drawn the lines and said, I do not consent to the consent for my consciousness to accept a charge that I will not get hung out to dry on the line with my person, which is the suit that I speak of. And in that experience, a charge being stayed means it would be unconscionable for the men and women acting on behalf of the corpse or the crown corpse to move it further any farther, because then they would accrue the karma, which is what this whole experience is all about. And when you say getting back to the core, then we go back to the French word for heart, which is cour, with an E inside of the court.
Yes. And exactly. We ascend through the core. We ascend through our heart space. So, and then even, so, because you're touching on so much, so going back into it, it's, again, there is no they. We're subscribing to the channel that that they're supplying. Instead of subscribing to it, turn it on. Change the channel. Go to another station, right? Different radio station, different television station. Don't subscribe to the show.
Frequency.
Exactly. Change your frequency. So go back to your core and go, does this serve the heart space? Does this serve that first? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, then why are we paying attention? Why are we picking up arms when we are not required to? Again, the law of cause and effect, these are immutable laws in science, in religion, in spirituality itself.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the eye for an eye mentality. We'd all be walking around here blind, and we have a blind walking around here already. So instead of my eye for your eye, why not we see the unity inside of it? Just take the eyes and put them together. It's a unity, right? It's a use. We have the cornucopia. We have all of that abundance already then. So let's not divide it. Let's not cut the cords.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of cords, I want to say that today, this is a lot of information for people who really need to see it as we who must come into formation with one another vibrationally, physically, and communally, that there is a perversion of all levels based on a corporate structure that has contaminated and consumed the sum of us. If we continue to trust entities that are designed to have us define ourselves according to identities of one-dimensional entities that the corpse would have us then be under the jurisdiction of, which allows them to apply their rules to us, except for then we see the them is us, except for if we're truly talking about them as entities, as mental constructs that we created and give our energy to, we can stop them from existing altogether, because then we take it back and actually have the personal responsibility, accountability, and liability that calls for the day of reckoning. That no God outside of us are going to be able to call for if we, as the individuated expressions of the all, don't do it ourselves, for ourselves, with ourselves.
Yes, correct. It's so. What is it again? If we are responsible for our own server, our own game that we are in, our own matrix system, whatever simulation you want to call it, whatever way you equate it to. So we're responsible for creating our experience. Why are we bringing this into our experience? And if it facilitated a growth period for us, because it does, we each learn from that. Wait a second, this doesn't feel right. Take our power back, then we get the reaction from that, right? Well, what is it that we learn? What's the growth, right? And we'll go back to chords, but chords with the CHOR, chords. So it's us singing together in harmony. It's us standing together in that harmony to bring it in, right? The harmony, the H is in that YHWH, that harmony part of it. You have that. So why are we allowing them to, again, cut that and individuate us, right? The left versus the right, whatever you want to call it, the labels that they put on us. Why are we letting them cut that to the eyes instead of the right? Have unity on us. So again, it is taking back our own power, and now taking, like you said, our own personal power. We are responsible for allowing it to happen. We are responsible for subscribing to it, regardless if we were ignorant of it or not. There are a lot of us that are not ignorant of it anymore. So take our power back. When we say the powers that be, well, we're a being. We have power. Take it back. We're not something outside of ourselves. We are the source in our being. So let's create a better game, a better experience for other people and for ourselves.
It's the ability to respond. And so with that, I say we need to come back another day to actually go through the major arcana so that we can digest what has been shared this day. Leave a comment, leave questions, leave what shows up for you. If you would prefer to do it privately, I'll put our emails and then you can read and reach out, because it is when we actually connect with those who care that we start to care about the ledge they know, such as what we've shared in this show. So I hope you've enjoyed the rhymes and the time and all that was offered to you as our gift of belief systems that I do believe are insightful and require you to use all three of your eyes to feel the truth of the resonance of what was shared this day. So, Rosemary, thank you very much for sharing everything that you did and facilitating this opportunity for us to learn the art of tarot. This was my first deck that I got back in high school, and it's still got the $12.99 price tag on it because I saved it all these years. And the Goddess Tarot, and then many others I've got back as well. And I do see the need to actually be showing each of the cards as we go when we go through the major arcana. So when this is up and ready, we'll do a recap of what was shared today because there were a lot of trails, and we want to nail it down so that we don't get crucified by staying there, which is what I believe the cross really is about. For then we can drop the T of the cross to be here, which is where our power truly is.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day. Peace out.
Recording stopped.
How was that?
It was good. It was good. I liked it. Oh,
You're still going.
I am. It is still good. And I'm going to end that. So I'm going to end that for our podcast. So I'll sign out on my end for the podcast I'm doing for story time. There is only audio for it, but we can add a video for it as well. And I'll do sports as well. Thank you for joining that. Thank you for joining Storytime. Thank you for allowing me to join your social media platform with Laura. And this is Rosemary.